8-Bit Christmas is a movie that I just recently caught wind of.
I don't even know who you are.
I remember just being on YouTube and constantly seeing the ads for this movie. And I didn't know what it was about because the ads really didn't explain it. It was just like, there are these kids, they're running around, and it's supposed to be funny, and it's a Christmas movie.
So you know how to pick locks?
That's me.
Do you know that's a felony?
And then this one kid references Die Hard.
Do you think Die Hard is a Christmas movie?
And I was intrigued by just that. And when it said 8-bit, I'm like, is this kind of like Pixels with Adam Sandler? Is it going to be like that? What is this? I had no idea what this was. But I was intrigued. 8-Bit Christmas is about this kid named Jack Doyle. And Jack Doyle, as the adult version, is played by Neil Patrick Harris. And Neil Patrick Harris is with his daughter, and he is explaining this story, this epic story that took place in the 80s about him and how he obtained the classic Nintendo. First of all, I'm a sucker for 80s movies. I'm a sucker for the 80s. It's nostalgia for me. I didn't grow up in the 80s, but I wish I did, because when I see movies that take place in the 80s, it just hits me in the sweet spot.
Get to the chopper!
So when this movie starts, we see Neil Patrick Harris and his daughter, and it's one of those movies where someone has a story to tell, and the other person, his daughter, doesn't want to listen, and he tells his daughter the story, and then we go back in time. And the thing that I thought was fascinating about this movie are the visuals, because there's this one scene where he's about to tell his daughter the story, and then you look at the TV screen, and then you see, the 8-bit pixels in the screen, and you see this kid riding the bike in the 8-bit pixel format, and then when this camera zooms in, the 8-bit pixels turns into a young Jake Doyle, who is played by Winslow Fegley, I think his name is. And I thought that was a nice transition. So there are lots of smooth, interesting, stylistic transitions that are very impressive in this film. And as the story progresses, we meet Jake Doyle's dad, who is played by Steve Zahn. And Steve Zahn did a fantastic job as the father here. There's this one scene where Steve Zahn and Winslow Fegley are in the mall, and there's this cool scene where Jake Doyle sees the Nintendo and it's talking to him. It's really cool. And then he starts playing the game Rampage, and then he's exaggerating about, the whole mall is cheering for me and stuff. And there is a lot of voiceover here. There's narration by Neil Patrick Harris, and me, I'm a guy who doesn't care about narration. I don't like narration in movies unless it's justified, unless it's used correctly. And what I mean by that, in this case, I think it's used correctly, because the movie begins with Neil Patrick Harris telling his daughter the story about how he got the Nintendo. So when we're watching the scenes of the younger version of him and we hear the older version of him narrating what's happening, I accept it in that regard, because I thought the transitions, back and forth made a lot of sense, and it worked for me. And so when he's playing the Nintendo and it's talking to him and he's telling the story, and then his sister, who is Lizzie Doyle, I can't pronounce the little girl's name, but she was great in this movie. I love the little girl. She wants to get a Cabbage Patch doll, and they're at the mall and they can't find it. And so then Doyle, he's playing the game, and then he loses his sister, and then Steve Zahn's character, John, comes in, and he's like, "Where's your sister?" And he's freaking out, and he actually assaults somebody. He assaults an elf. He punches the elf in the face, which is funny. There's lots of funny moments in here, but then I'm like, that's assault. So the movie, it's not realistic per se, but it's a fun movie. It's a fun movie. It's a heartwarming movie. It's a family movie. It's a Christmas movie. It takes place in the 80s. Lots of cool nostalgia and lots of fun moments that they're not extremely deep or anything. They're not, realistic per se, but I think the movie as a whole It's very effective.
Oh, sorry. Detail I guess I forgot to mention.
There's lots of generic characters in this movie who don't get any depth to them, but they're interesting and it's fun and they're kids and it's cute and it's fun. Overall, I think this is a good movie. This is a good movie because the story is intriguing enough to hold my interest, because I like the Jake character. I think he's cool. Then when we meet all the side characters who, like the nerd, the generic characters, and they're really predictable, but it's a fun story. I follow along with it from beginning to end. I don't like narration, but the narration, like I said, is acceptable for me in this because of the way it's executed. And it's a fun, heartfelt Christmas movie, and that's all it is. There's nothing deeper than that. And I will say this, at the very end of the movie, this movie did make me cry. I shed 2 tears. 1 tear came out of my right eye, and then a few seconds after that, a big tear came out of my left eye. So the ending did make me cry. I think the ending is it's heartfelt and it's satisfying. It kind of comes out of nowhere. They didn't really need it, but it did make me cry and it was effective. And so yeah, this movie I think is a really good, solid Christmas movie that's fun and entertaining for the whole family. That's all I have to say.